Hey, welcome in, Tara here, and today I'm going to talk through everything you might want to know about the Analogue Pocket, or at least everything I know about the Pocket. Is it worth it? What are the costs associated with it? What are its specs and features? What do I like and dislike about it after owning one for over a year now? All that kind of stuff, so let's get right into it. If you don't already know, here's the deal with Analogue. It's an American video game hardware company founded over a decade ago by this guy named Christopher Tabor, who's also worked as the chief marketer for 8-Bit Do, the retro controller manufacturer. Analogue specializes in making bespoke, high-quality consoles that play retro software, but have a lot of modern bells and whistles and quality-of-life features that were lacking with old-school devices. So in late 2021, Analogue released the Pocket, seemingly their most popular product to date, I think because of its simplicity and just the widespread nostalgic appeal. It's essentially a modern-day Game Boy, powered by a field programmable gate array microchip, also known as an FPGA, which, as I understand, is particularly adept at achieving speed, flexibility, and parallel processing power. This FPGA chip is the Pocket's engine. This is what makes it all work. To look at it, yeah, it's basically a Game Boy, right? It makes you think of your childhood, the screen, the D-pad, the face buttons, all in the palm of your hand. But the Pocket is so cool in my opinion because it's not just an emulator. This is a real deal console capable of playing original Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance cartridges right out of the box. Analogue also sells additional adapters for the Pocket so that it can play original Neo Geo and Game Gear and TurboGrafx games too, so this thing has a lot of capabilities. Here's where things get interesting though. With the help of an SD card and cores, meaning files that essentially emulate the computer of, let's say, an NES or a Genesis, the Pocket can read and play ROM files too. We're talking ROMs for Atari games, NES, SNES, Genesis, and there's free community-created computer apps that can help you load cores and ROMs onto an SD card, which then you pop into your Pocket and then play. So that's where this console's potential really takes off, because just think of how many different consoles, how many games from different generations of consoles. We're talking thousands and thousands of games that this one little portable device can, in theory, run. You could have your physical collection of GB and GBA games, and then essentially a built-in library of other retro games, many of which were for home consoles originally, not handheld consoles, so that's really cool. I will note that this ROM topic is quite a controversial one though, because the community is really excited about the potential, right? And there's literally people, as I speak, trying to get PS1 games to run on the Pocket, but just grabbing random game ROMs off the internet is technically illegal. It's of course what most people will do, given the work it can take to, I guess, extract retro game files, and even then, that process is a legal and ethical gray area, to say the least. The folks at Analogue, of course, come right out and say, hey, we do not support the use of copyrighted ROM files, and our device does not play copyrighted ROM files. This is not an emulation device. But of course, it has an SD card slot. A ROM file can be put onto that SD card, and voila, your Pocket's now suddenly running a game. So that's more context for you than anything else, but I do feel obligated to state before we get too much deeper into this, I in no way promote or encourage any illicit use of copyrighted ROMs. Back to the Pocket itself, maybe my favorite thing about it is its dock. So it's sold separately from the Pocket. You simply plug the dock's power supply into a nearby outlet and then run an HDMI cable from the dock to your TV, obviously mount your Pocket down in the dock, and boom, you're playing Super Mario Land or Oracle of Seasons on the big screen with 1080p support. It's really, really awesome. And the Pocket supports a really wide range of controller options too. Using a modern controller for like a 20, 30-year-old game feels pretty awkward to me, so I've purchased an 8-Bit Do SN30 Pro Bluetooth gamepad for my dock, and it works really well. It's lightweight, it's responsive, and it feels appropriate for just about any game I would play on my Pocket. I'll put a link to that controller down in the description if you want to check it out, along with a lot of other relevant links based on things we talk about here. A couple other quick notes too. You can take screenshots with the Pocket, which rolls. You can also create save states, like basically save scum your way through any game, whether or not that game has an adequate sort of native save system or not. The Pocket just takes care of that problem for you, which is great. The Pocket has a standard sleep function, which can be convenient too, but I always prefer just to create a proper save state when I'm gradually playing through a game versus just abusing the sleep function. Here's the crazy stuff though. The Pocket also features a built-in digital audio workstation called Nanoloop. It's a synthesizer and a sequencer. You can literally create music from scratch with the program, whether you're a musician or not. It's very user-friendly, so that's a really crazy feature, and the Pocket can connect to any PC or Mac as well with MIDI and sync cables. The Pocket also has full GB Studio support, which, if you don't know, GB Studio is a really, really amazing platform people are using to design retro-style games from scratch. There's just a lot going on here. The menu interface, too, something that was not present on an original Game Boy. I really like it on the Pocket, and it's pretty much idiot-proof. It's super simple to navigate. It feels pretty engineered, like created by a developer, but not in an obtuse way. It's cool and stark and minimal, like a very retro chic aesthetic. Here's a couple specs for you, too, which are worth sharing, I think, because the numbers are really impressive. So the Pocket features a 3.5-inch LCD screen that hits somewhere between 150 and 200 nits, I believe, at max brightness, which is really bright for a screen this small. I love this next stat. Its resolution is 1660 pixels by 1440 pixels, which is complete overkill in the best way possible. As Analogue loves to advertise, it's literally 10 times the resolution of the original Game Boy. The screen itself is also made from Gorilla Glass, so it's strong, it's durable. The color range is really, really impressive too. It's the first big thing I noticed when firing up an old game for the first time. The colors, they pop, yet still feel very true. There's such a careful balance between retro and modern aesthetics, and the Pocket somehow straddles that line almost flawlessly, I would say. The engineering team at Analogue was clearly trying to achieve the best of all worlds here. So to recap, the Pocket itself is selling directly from Analogue for $220 US. The dock is selling for another $100 US. That 8-bit do controller I'm using, that's $45 US. I also, from Analogue, purchased their custom-tailored hard case for the Pocket. That's $30 US. And also one of their custom-tailored tempered glass screen protectors. That's $16 US. So all in all, to have the full Pocket experience, let's say, with the insurance policy of the hard case and the screen protector, we're talking a little over $400 US before tax and shipping. In my opinion, the Pocket itself is a premium product that should last forever and never really need to be replaced. So you do get what you pay for, it seems to me. Of course, it's not necessary to get all those accessories. You could just get a Pocket and the Pocket alone for probably $250-ish after tax and shipping. For reference, the Game Boy Color, when it released back in 1998, was selling for $80 US, which, adjusting for inflation, is like $150 today. And from the screen size and screen quality and audio quality and extra bells and whistles, yeah, I would say the Pocket easily offers $100 in value beyond that of an OG GBC. Analogue has released some really cool limited editions and colors of the Pocket too. Those pretty much sell out right away, but these days it appears you can get a standard black or white Pocket pretty much on demand. So I pre-ordered a white Pocket early, but there was a lot of interest, so I got put into a later pre-order wave and ended up getting mine in late 2022, I think like November, December 2022, and so I've had it a little over a year now, like, 13, 14 months, so any subjective comments I make about the Pocket are based on that sample size. And I'm going to get into that next, I suppose, like a mini review of the Pocket before I get into some more fun stuff like the games I've been playing and, my history with Game Boys and stuff. So I think the Pocket feels great handheld. I love this too. Every single button is mappable. God, I love that mappable buttons as a feature is becoming more and more mainstream, and it's present here with the Pocket, which is great. And overall, I think the team at Analogue struck a really good balance between the clickiness of the buttons and the sponginess of them, because in my opinion, you don't want too much of either. There's also 2 shoulder buttons. They're a tad awkward to adjust to. Definitely not intuitive in the way shoulder buttons are on, let's say, a DualShock or DualSense controller, but they're also likely less critical to most of the games you're going to be playing on the Pocket. The way I look at it is this kind of console design isn't really meant to support shoulder or trigger buttons, but this is probably the least clumsy application of them that we could expect. So I suppose it is nice to have those as an option depending on what you're playing. You also have Start, Select, and a Home button right in the middle, which, like many modern consoles, is used to bounce you back to the system menu. You also, of course, have volume up and volume down along with your power button. Those are on the left side of the Pocket. You have a micro SD slot on the right side, and the USB-C port for charging and docking is on the bottom, along with a classic 3.5mm headphone jack. I know a lot of people have really strong opinions about whether they want a headphone cord dangling off the top or the bottom of a device. I personally find the bottom to be less intrusive, especially because you're holding the device in your hands off the ground. One thing that will annoy some people is the Pocket's lack of Bluetooth functionality, meaning you can't just pair your wireless Beats, let's say, to the Pocket itself. I don't know, maybe they wanted to keep costs down, maybe they wanted to preserve that experience of having to plug in a pair of earbuds into a 3.5mm port. I don't know. Again, this is where the device straddles that retro versus modern line, and not everyone is going to feel the same about whether they always stick that landing. I personally have no problem grabbing a pair of wired Skull Candy buds I got from Target for $10 into the Pocket. Or you can blow it out and plug a really, really high quality pair in, because the audio is seriously fantastic with the Pocket. It's mind-blowing, really. The music in any game is so much bassier than you remembered. The Analogue has this way, I guess it's in their secret programming sauce, they have this way of amplifying everything, seemingly, in the right way. High-pitched sound effects are crispier. Music in general is way groovier. You can pick out the bass notes. You can really appreciate that bottom end of any piece of Game Boy music. I found that the Pocket has really enhanced my appreciation for this style of music, where technical limitations often bred creativity and really, really memorable melodies and grooves, whether you're talking Pokémon or Wario Land or the Final Fantasy games on Game Boy. Headphones are totally worth using for these reasons, but the built-in audio system does play in stereo, not mono, which is a nice touch. Like I said, it's kind of shocking just how bright and colorful the screen can be. It feels more in line with smartphone brightness than old Game Boys, which in hindsight, even with the worm light, how did we ever make sense of the pixels on those screens, you know? It's crazy to look back at just how grayed out and dim they were, even on a Game Boy Color. But hey, it's also the best we had at the time, the best application we had ever seen, so our expectations were different. But if the thought of a hyper bright screen actually scares you, know that the brightness levels on the Pocket are highly adjustable, and there's a ton of extremely carefully tuned filters you can apply to your games too if you choose. So this means with pretty shocking accuracy, you can recreate the displays of a Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advanced. Filter is such a generic term these days, but these Pocket filters you can just tell were lovingly made, painstakingly crafted. I mean, they affect backlighting, pixel grid patterns, subpixel patterns. If you personally love that chunkier, dim, gray-green quality, which in and of itself, let's be real, that's an amazing aesthetic. That's like one of the most defining aesthetics in the history of gaming. You have it. You have it in full here on the Pocket. Here's a weird comment. The actual cartridge slot on the backside, the way in which it's designed versus what I was used to as a kid, the cartridges feel a little bit like they're floating on the backside of the Pocket. Like they could just fall out or get ripped out at any time. Now, I've not had any problems with this design. It's been fine. I think it just goes back to expectations, to what I was used to. And this design is very different. But I will say I do miss that satisfying click that came with punching a cartridge into the back of your Game Boy. But either way, the Pocket's design gets the job done. I'm just noting, kind of like with the shoulder buttons, it feels a little unusual at first. Between the floating cartridges and those shoulder buttons, the backside of the Pocket might feel a little busy to you the first time you get your hands on it, but again, I've not had any problems. It doesn't affect my immersion or anything with the games I'm playing, and at this point, I think I'm more used to it than I would be used to the feel and design of, let's say, an old school original Game Boy Color. A few other features that I haven't really made use of but are worth calling out: the dock can support up to 4 controllers at once, wireless or wired, meaning yes, couch co-op is a thing. You can also use a link cable to connect 2 Pockets and, yep, trade Pokemon. Whatever you would have done back in the day with a Game Boy, the Pocket has those kinds of functions covered and so much more. Analogue advertises 6 to 10 hours on a full battery charge, depending on your settings and usage. And I found that range to be fairly accurate. Sometimes I feel like I'm maybe only getting 4-ish hours of continuous use. But then other times when I'm off and on, creating save states, putting the thing to sleep, I definitely feel like I've gotten 10 hours or maybe even more. So I do feel like it all depends on how you use the Pocket, your settings on the Pocket, but playing while you're charging is also not a big deal, and you definitely don't have to worry about it puttering out on you after just an hour or two of use. That's clearly not an issue with the Pocket's battery. Here's a funny wrinkle for you. When I first got my dock, probably the aspect of the Pocket I was most excited to try out, I took it out of the box, set it up, and as soon as I connected my Pocket to it, it shocked me. Like, legitimately, enough of a zap that it scared the hell out of me. Like, oh my God, is this thing dangerous? Is this thing a fire hazard? Sure enough, I tried it a few more times, and while docking the Pocket or plugging the dock's power supply into an outlet, I'd get that same little shock. So I contacted Analogue, and I will say they were very responsive, very professional, and they made it easy for me to mail my dock back to them, and they either repaired it or sent me a new one within just a couple weeks. I can't say for certain if this is the same one I originally had, but I've had no issues with it whatsoever since then. And it definitely wasn't a problem with the Pocket. It was clearly a problem with the dock and the dock alone. So it was a bummer in the sense that I had to wait several more weeks to safely use my dock with the Pocket, but all I lost was that time. It was an inconvenience. But worth noting, it's not every day you take an electronic product out of its packaging, plug it in, and get zapped, especially a product that cost $100. They did make it right, though. I'll give them that. And I'm sure if this was a widespread issue, we would have heard more about it at this point. From what I can tell, I think I just got unlucky. My dock was faulty. Now, I'm saying a lot of complimentary things here, but of course, if you dig around online, especially Reddit, you'll find a lot of Analogue haters, people claiming the company is evil, that they make crap products, they're anti-consumer, they shouldn't be supported, they shouldn't be getting anyone's business. I don't know, man. I can't find any evidence of them being scummy or anti-consumer. They're a small company making highly specialized products that sometimes sell out. Are they manufacturing hype and limited sales in some kind of artificial way? I don't know. But I can only speak to my own experience. I pre-ordered a Pocket. I had to wait to get it, but I did get it, and that kind of supply-demand dynamic, again, I don't believe is an issue anymore. It appears to me, as of today, you can just go right on the website and buy one. You do not have to pre-order anymore. I did have that legitimate issue with my dock. It was clearly faulty, but my new one works fine. And again, if every Analogue dock customer was getting electrocuted, we'd hear more about it. Their shipping costs seem a tad high, in my opinion. That's one of the only nitpicks I can think of. I would highly recommend the tempered glass and hard case. It's such a cool device, and you want to preserve it and keep it nice for years to come so you can keep enjoying it. So yeah, take care of it. There's a lot of products on Amazon and elsewhere that I can tell Pocket customers have found success with, but I did just decide to get their proprietary case. It's extremely sturdy. There's no jiggling or rattling at all because it's specifically made for the Pocket. I don't want to test it, but my gut says it could fall off a counter or a shelf and the console would be just fine. The tempered glass protector goes a long way in this department too. I know $16 seems pretty steep for this little cover you put on your screen, but imagine getting a crack down the middle. of the Pocket screen. I mean, it would just be such a bummer. It's 3/10 of an inch thick, the tempered glass cover that Analogue manufactures. It's cut specifically for the Pocket screen. I didn't find it very difficult to put on, and yeah, I just figured if I was going to invest in a Pocket, I was going to go all the way. I might have mentioned this already, but the Pocket itself is really light. It's not a burden at all to hold, much less so than the Nintendo Switch. And I guess that's about it in terms of a review. I actually love my Pocket more now than I did over a year ago when I got it. The more time I've spent with it, the more I've played it. It's really grown on me. I've become super attached to it, and it's a legit staple in my console rotation. I mean, I have a Switch, a PS5, I do a little PC gaming through Steam, and now the Pocket. So yeah, it's become an essential part of my gaming library and my gaming collection. I'm a huge retro gaming fan. I enjoy going back in time with games as much as I enjoy playing new stuff, sometimes maybe even more so. And I'm very skeptical personally of services like NSO and Game Pass, where I don't feel games are necessarily preserved as well as they could be and are only accessible via streaming and subscriptions, and whose access could be revoked at any time. That stuff always makes me nervous. So in a small way, it feels like the Pocket is my way of pushing back against those trends. The Pocket is everything my Game Boys were and more. It's a gaming device I hope to have with me forever now. It allows me to access multiple generations of games from multiple platforms. It's crazy how one little piece of technology can facilitate so much gaming. So yeah, I can't recommend it enough. I love the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it sounds. Its functionality between Nanoloop and the dock and the adapters and GB Studio and the SD capabilities. Everyone will have a few nitpicks with a device like this. I do too. But if you're curious or on the fence or really wondering, is it a scam? Is it not premium? For me, for what it's worth, this thing's the real deal. If you can afford it, go for it. It gets my highest recommendation. Plus, you get free lifetime firmware updates on the Pocket and the dock. Analogue has done a great job, from what I can tell, of continuing to improve things and add new features and functionalities. They continue to support more and more types of controllers, and there's just a really cool community growing around this thing. People pushing its capabilities, just sharing in the joy of retro gaming. I don't know, I get very warm and fuzzy over this thing, and not because I have rose-colored glasses on. I mean, yeah, Game Boys were a huge part of my childhood, but honestly, by any modern measure, this thing is not only the ultimate Game Boy replacement, but an all-around awesome retro gaming machine whose potential is just going to keep expanding in the coming years. So if you love the Pocket now, you're probably going to love it even more 2, 3, 4 years from now. And lastly, I do want to talk about games, some fun stuff, what I've actually been playing on my Pocket over the last year. Okay, so the first game I fired up was Super Mario Land. I know not everybody holds the Mario Land titles in the same esteem as the mainline console series, but man, I really love them. I think they still look and play wonderfully. Mario Land 1 and 2, 6 golden coins, and then the Wario Land spin-off games. That original Wario Land, which is technically Super Mario Land 3, was my single favorite Game Boy game as a kid. I still remember playing it on my red Game Boy Pocket. I remember spending so many hours with that game on my belly, on the carpet in my parents' house, just plugging away. I still enjoy the level design and all the secrets and power-ups. There's some really tough secrets in Wario Land. Some of those drove me crazy as a kid. Some of them I never figured out. So yeah, there's just a lot that keeps you engaged and returning to that game over and over. And the soundtrack is S tier too. That opening level theme in Rice Beach, chef's kiss. I'm also a huge fan of the Super Mario Advance remakes. I love the SNES All-Stars remakes too, but there's just such a unique quality about the art styles in those advanced remakes, so I've been enjoying those a lot. I've also been itching to play the Oracle games as well as Minish Cap, so I recently started a playthrough in Oracle of Seasons. I just love that game. That's kind of peak pixel art to me, and especially with the direction Zelda has taken in recent years with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, my longing for that more old school linear puzzle driven Zelda, it's as strong as it's ever been. And man, does the Pocket's tech make the Oracle visuals and music pop. It looks and sounds the way I remembered it as a kid. Not the way it was, but the way I remembered it. You know what I mean? Because in your mind, retro games are perfect, but sometimes when you go back to them, not always, but sometimes it's like, oh, maybe I should have left this in the past. Maybe this didn't age quite as well as I expected. And I'm not saying that's the case with the Oracle games necessarily, but yeah, the Analogue Pocket just gives these games the treatment they deserve. One of my favorite GBA cartridges is the double pack of Crash the Huge Adventure and Spyro the Season of Ice. Those are both legit good games. I think next to Crash 4, The Big Adventure is my favorite post-trilogy, post-Naughty Dog Crash game. That one has been really fun to play on the big screen with my Pocket docked. Rayman 3 on GBA is also such a gem. For obvious reasons, the mainline console Rayman games get all the attention. 1, 2, 3, Origins, and Legends. But GBA 3 is a really unique side-scrolling hybrid with story and gameplay elements from both Rayman 2 and Rayman 3. It's maybe the single most underrated Rayman game in my opinion. I far prefer Rayman 2 to Rayman 3, so it's really cool to get sort of an alternate version of 3, but with a lot of the ingredients that made 2 so special. So I feel like whether you're a fan of one game more so than the other, or just a fan of both, it's a hidden gem every Rayman fan should play. I was a total Pokemon freak back in the day, like many of us were, particularly with Generation 1 and Generation 2, but I just never played the third gen of Pokemon, Ruby and Sapphire, for whatever reason, so I was able to get a copy of Emerald actually for a pretty reasonable price on eBay, so I'm really interested to give that a go sometime soon. Personally, Pokemon lost a lot of its appeal for me when they went from pixel art to that more chibi style. I honestly wish they'd make like a modern retro style Pokemon game. I wish they'd go back to pixel art but in a modern way. Wouldn't that be cool? Oh, the Pokemon trading card game is another classic. That's one of those if you know games. I played the heck out of that one as a kid and couldn't resist popping in the cartridge a couple times throughout 2023. The soundtrack is top tier, and I always felt that turn-based gameplay was far superior to the gameplay in the mainline Pokemon games. It requires a little more strategy, a little more thought, and building a custom deck is just super satisfying. Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. I love me some classic Castlevania. I really wish this franchise was still active. I hope some publisher or developer brings it back soon, but Aria of Sorrow holds up wonderfully. It's got to be one of the best Castlevania games ever made, and it was a game I was particularly excited to play with the dock. Seeing it on the big screen, I don't know, it kind of just makes it feel like it's more in the same class as Symphony of the Night or something like that. I love Mario vs. Donkey Kong. I'm a sucker for a good puzzle platformer, so I've been playing through the original Mario vs. DK, enjoying that a lot. And then the Game Boy version of the original Donkey Kong is also excellent. That is the definitive version of that game in my mind and has so much extra content. What else? F-Zero Maximum Velocity. If you know me, you know I'm a huge F-Zero fan, and Maximum Velocity rolls. Still holds up really wonderfully today. I think it's probably my third favorite F-Zero game behind X and GX. Super Mario Bros. Deluxe was another one of my most played GB games back in the day. So it's the full Super Mario 1 experience, but with so much extra content. Again, like I said about DKGB, it's the ultimate version of this game in my mind. There's just so much fan service packed into it. And it's just interesting to me how Game Boy did offer some really definitive, almost like anniversary / collection style editions of console games back in the day. I don't know, I could go on and on, but I've been having so much fun with this thing, and the Pocket has just become such a wonderful little gaming portal to me. So much nostalgia, so much access to old game libraries. It's just awesome having this thing as an option, and as a very real alternative to my PS5 or Switch. You know, sometimes I don't want to fire up my PS5 and sit on the couch with a controller and play some complex 3D game. I want a simpler and more immediate experience, and that's exactly what the Pocket provides. I've been filling some holes in my collection too. I've unfortunately lost some GB games over the years, like DK Land and Bomberman GB, and I was able to get really good copies on eBay of those for like 20 bucks or less. I even copped a Game Boy camera for I think like $40. Again, I lost mine back in childhood, I still think about that. It still bothers me every once in a while. I mean, there were, images of my family on that thing, crazy pixelated images that I would just love to have today. I don't, unfortunately, but it was really special being able to get another camera and just play around with it in 2023. What a strange experience to be using a Game Boy camera in 2023, But let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about the Pocket that I haven't already answered, or if you own one too, what have your experiences been with it? I look forward to talking with you more about this, but yeah, count me as a huge fan. I just can't recommend the Pocket enough. If you enjoyed this podcast, come hang out in my Discord server, Terapop's Treehouse, or know that you can unlock a lot of new bonus content from me every month, in addition to a huge archive of past newsletters and podcasts over at patreon.com/terapop. Those links are both down in the description, along with some other relevant links based on what we discussed here. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.